All right. Well, hey, folks, welcome to On This Hill, a podcast of Church on the Hill. And we're up here on a sunny day in Oregon. Spring has sprung. Summer's coming. We're living for the finish line of June, right? I have with us today Adam Kronberger as our guest, not a stranger to us here at Church on the Hill, but maybe to you. So we're going to launch into a conversation. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So I mentioned that we're headed for the finish line. How many days before? Adam is the head of schools here at Church on the Hill, Cross Hill Christian. How many days till the?
I do not count them. It's yeah.
There it is, folks. The director of this whole thing doesn't count the days.
We live day by day. Once the students are gone, we're still at work. So it just keeps rolling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does it feel to end a school year? I mean, just from your point of view, does it like a relief? Is it sad or?
Yeah, it's bittersweet, but my parents were lifelong public school educators, and so education is all I've ever known. And so I realized the season of schooling is pretty unique, and it's one of the benefits is there's a start and an end.
Yeah.
There's a constant rhythm. There's lots of vacation days, and things like that. So it's nice when you're on. Like right now, we're in a season, lots of 5-day weeks. So for a lot of us, that means 50, 60, 65-hour weeks.
Wow.
You know, three evening events this week, but we're still here at 7 a.m. And then summer comes, and we're working a little bit less, more 35 hours a week, and it's fun to have those seasons.
Yeah. That's amazing. So the secret here at Church on the Hill, Cross Hill Christian, is the real brains behind the operation is our wives. They're the ones that keep us organized and healthy. Your wife, Chantel, works here with you in the school. What's her position?
Yeah, she's our 1st through 4th grade principal. Nice. So we have 4 principals here, and she's one of them, and obviously helps keep the head of school in line as well.
And so you said you come from a background of education. It sounds like your children, at least the first out of the house, is following. Is that right?
She's going in counseling.
Oh, counseling.
Yeah, counseling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So more pastoral counseling.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think? Why did she choose that? What do you think influenced that?
I feel blessed. I feel like it was exactly God's design for her. Wow. So she enjoys communication. She enjoys psychology, and those are 2 foundational pieces of counseling. And then she loves people. The last few years, she's been an RA in her dorm of 300 girls.
Which school does she go to?
Northwest Nazarene University in Idaho. And so she's had to deal with suicide watch, ER visits, police showing up, girls in crisis, and she's really thrived. So I don't feel like she knows what she's getting into, and the more she gets into it, the more she's drawn into it for sure.
Wow.
So,
and is your son a senior this year?
He's a sophomore.
Oh, he's a sophomore. So he's got a couple years here with us.
Yeah, still got some more work to do.
Yeah. What do you think he'll do? What do you think he'd like to do?
He's more on the other side of the spectrum, probably engineering, robotics, STEAM, that kind of stuff, maybe some entrepreneur business stuff. So, yeah.
That's awesome. We could go into where they got that, where those 2 kids got those bents, but
yeah.
It's pretty cool though to watch your kids develop, and the differences we see in them, right? Everyone's different.
Yeah, there's a mixture of DNA.
Right.
God's got it figured out.
Yeah. Is it nature or nurture sometimes? Is it, where do they pick I have 2 boys. You have a boy and a girl. Both my boys are wonderful in their own right. They're smart and they love what they do, but they're very different. One's on that creative side of things, and he loves the new and the novel and the different, and the other is very much, an achiever, and so it's interesting to watch, huh?
And once we think we have people figured out, then they change on us.
Right.
It's just like in a marriage. I've become more like my wife, and she's become more like me, and it is complimentary, but it's also surprising and frustrating at times.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's somebody coined that term. You married the strangers, so to speak. You're just constantly changing. So, hey, so this morning, as we're talking about just school and so forth, and the rhythms of I think from a pastor's point of view, I here in the building here at Church on the Hill and Cross Hill Christian, which is running during the day, I observe the rhythms of movements and chapels and lunchtimes and sports and all that. And it's amazing. If you've never been here Monday through Friday, you should come visit us because it's an entirely different world than a Sunday. But both of those things, the school and the church, even though we direct and pastor them, they have different rhythms, right? I mean, the school is that much more predictable, I think, where I liken church ministry, pastoral ministry, to being in a batting cages like with 3 machines throwing balls at you. You never know which one's going to fire, but both have a challenge. And I think what I want to just ask you a little bit about today is this idea of maintenance, personal maintenance, personal health. How do we stay healthy? And specifically, I use the metaphor of a dashboard. Those lights come on our dashboard to signal us that we need to pay attention to something. When the water gauge comes on or goes hot, we have to stop and see why. Or when the fuel thing dings, the light dings, it's time to pull over and get some gas. When the oil light goes on, we better stop because the engine may be burning up. And if joy was that oil light, that ding, does that ever come on for you? Like, hey, you know what? I kind of lost the joy of this. Is it just me, or does that ever happen to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think early on in my career, circumstances were a big cause of that warning light going on, where it's just like every week I might say, I had 2 or 3 good days and I had 2 or 3 really bad days. And I would connect my joy to those good or bad days, allowing circumstances to drive my health. Mm-hmm. That's a trap, because it's just going to be a roller coaster ride for forever. In fact, the longer we do life, the more things God tends to put in our path that can be difficult circumstances.
To challenge it?
Yeah. And so, for me, it's been a process of figuring out how to not let circumstances and those negative circumstances drive your joy. And the reason joy is in that list of the fruit of the Spirit is because it comes from somewhere else. It comes from the Spirit within us. And if it's powerful as God says it is, then it can transcend our circumstances.
So what you're saying really it applies to everybody, right? I mean, not just people who are in our position, because I think, to be fair, our position is pretty intense. Again, there's a lot going on, and in a school, I can only imagine you're dealing with what in your situation in a school, you're taking care of students, you're taking care of their parents, and you're taking care of your team. What kind of things kind of deplete you? Are there things that you feel like, I got to be careful there, because that's a joy stealer, that's a joy drainer?
Yeah, certainly we have the best job in the world. I mean, we have a tremendous community, and this week is Teacher Appreciation Week, and our love tank gets filled up often. We have a lot of just supportive families, but we're also in the business of training disciples. And if we weren't in that business, then life would be more comfortable. But Jesus came because we need transformation. And so there's a lot of transactions that subtract from that love tank. And one thing, though, that I've learned is probably the heaviest things that we deal with are, the shouts, the angry emails, or the frustrated student or parent that may not be based in reality, or may need to have a fuller context to understand the truth. But something that God's also taught us is, like in our marriage, oftentimes we give our spouse our worst because it's the safest place.
Yeah.
We know that we're not going to vent with a stranger or a neighbor because that's their entire perspective of who we are. But when you have a trusted spouse, you're like, I had a tough day, or I'm going to be a little bit human here in the flesh, not rationalizing that's okay at all. But at the end of the day, their committed love to you is still there, and they're going to be there, and they're going to support you. So one thing as Cross Hill Christian has continued to build a strong foundation, some families are with us for 20, 25 years. When those seemingly negative transactions seem to come our way, to just take a breath and realize that, God's in this. And, yes, people yell at strangers with road rage, but when there seems to be this yelling at us, and I do the same thing to others at times, to sit back and say, hey, this is because this is a safe place. They love us. They trust us.
Wow.
And let's get to the end of this story, or the end of this conversation, which is, I got you. Yeah. I'm on your team. Yeah. Sure, here's maybe a little bit of truth and love to help with that context. But not only is that better ministry as part of God's kingdom and perhaps good discipleship, but it's also good for your heart to have that perspective.
Yeah. That's such a great perspective on conflict. That hey, there's something really positive here that we can work through, and if we work through it, we're going to be better because of it.
And it's not a position of saying, well, they're coming to us because we're wiser or we're more mature or we're better. It's just we have relationship because the presence of God is in this relationship. It's in this community. And so there's no pressure as far as how am I going to fix this because they're trusting me with their junk. It's more about, they're trusting me with their junk because I'm a safe place and I've got thick skin and a soft heart that God's given us. And so, let's do this together. Let's pray about it.
Thick skin and a soft heart. That's a good line to remember. I want to have thick skin and a soft heart. And there's varying degrees of that, isn't there? In the Old Testament, there's an example of a guy who had a tough assignment, Nehemiah. And I was reflecting on this earlier before we got together that his assignment was to rebuild an entire city, to gather people who'd been scattered. They'd been in captivity. They'd been traumatized. So and literally he was working with the rubble of the city, but also working with the rubble of people's lives. The law had been ignored. The law had been hidden. And, of course, the story's much bigger. But that word rubble, working in the rubble of people's lives. And but in the middle of it, in chapter 8, I think, he told the people, hey, I'm paraphrasing, cheer up. The joy of the Lord is our strength. The joy of the Lord. What does that mean to you? The joy of the Lord is ours. Because it sounds almost, VBS-ish. Right.
Right.
The joy of the Lord is our strength. But what does that mean?
I think it's a posture. I'm reminded of Pastor Jerry Hune, who started the school here in 1992, well before I joined. But I did serve with him at another school before coming here. So I have rubbed shoulders with him a lot. And he would walk the hallways singing worship songs. And when I was in my 20s, I thought I was so obnoxious, and just a little loopy. And I realized that posture is so key. In fact, my favorite time on this campus, which I experienced this morning with the beautiful sunrises, is around 6:45, 7 a.m. when I come up here and there's about 3 cars in the parking lot. And we're just getting set for that day. And I'm often not singing worship songs. I don't like to hear my own voice, but I'm playing music on my phone as I walk around campus and get us set for the day. I think that posture is really key. Thinking of Nehemiah, something that we do here is we make sure we pray every morning somewhere on our campus, either our entire staff or in our different departments or prayer partners. We're praying as a posture of the joy of the Lord. And oftentimes in that prayer, we'll speak as Paul did, in our weakness, his power is made perfect.
Wow.
So joy that is conjured up is fake, and you'll
fluff.
Yeah, you'll find yourself you'll wanting. It's not genuine.
Dissipates quickly. Yeah.
Right. But I mean, we pray this often that Paul realized, hey, in my weakness, his power is made perfect. And then Paul says, you know what? I will rejoice then in my weakness. Wow. What a great way to live, because almost every day of our life, whether it's parenting our kids, figuring out our finances, working in our careers, trying to minister to our neighbors, it's a mess.
Yeah.
It's a mess. And it can be depressing. And to just be able to rest in, I feel so weak right now. And God is like, perfect. Finally, you're where I want you to be. And now
I don't want to be here.
Yeah. But then it doesn't mean like you get to camp out there. Then he's like, now feel my power. Because if you come to me and access what I have for you in this moment, I've got power. I've got that solution. I mean, a great example of that is how God works healing through people who say, hey, we're weak. We can't do this without God's power. And he shows up, and then we actually see this physical healing. Well, God's our Jehovah Jireh. He wants to heal, and he's the author of all redemption. And so in all this messiness, it's like, man, we feel weak. We have that power. And like I said, to come full circle, when you live like that, you're really affirming God's sovereignty, that you trust him, that he's in charge, that he's got all the power in the world and he can do it. And that posture, I think, allows authentic joy to exist. And like Paul says, love, joy, peace. And I think all three of those are kind of, you can't have one without the other. They go hand in hand.
Yeah. You think to a watching world, or to a church in the midst of a hurting world, because I don't think there's any debate on whether the world's hurting, right? But do you see it outside the walls of the church, like how joy can be a witness to a world out there that watches us or interacts with us? Is there a correlation maybe between joy and generosity, for example? You see, is there something there, an intersect there somehow?
Yeah, absolutely. Just yesterday, we had 13 of our high school students downtown Salem sharing their joy. They were just walking around campus, or walking around downtown with some of our teachers and some YWAMers, and talking to people about Jesus and praying for them. And I love training them. I'm like, and so all you do is you just go up to this stranger and you just say, "Hey, I'm so-and-so. I go to Cross Hill Christian. My principal's letting me skip school today so I can talk to strangers about Jesus." And anyhow, your question made me think of that, the smile on their face, the joy of serving God. I think that definitely resonates with those outside of the campus. But to me, generosity, it requires sacrifice. And sacrifice, it's hard to have that joy. And sometimes I think making sacrifice is supposed to stretch us. And I think it can result in joy. And we know, God wants a joyful giver, whatever type of generosity that looks like.
Right, yeah.
But for me, I would say joy and service go together. When I'm generous, and I think generosity and service are
because it's not just money,
are connected to each other.
It's time or resources or something. Yeah.
But I think about, like in Ephesians, it's very clear we've been saved by grace through our faith, not a result of our own works, so no one can boast. And then it says, "Hey, and we are God's workmanship, created in His image, to do good works, which He has prepared beforehand for us to walk in." And I think about when I feel like I am kind of like chariots of fire, when Eric said, "Hey, when I run, I feel your pleasure."
Right, yeah.
When I'm working and I feel God's pleasure, that gives me joy in the Lord. I think about the parable where Jesus is talking about the servant who comes in from the field, and the attitude of the servant is, I'm just your unworthy servant. I've only just done my duty.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think especially as we get older, and I just put my head on my pillow at the end of the night and be like, "Father, can you say, 'Well done, good and faithful servant,' today?" Did I have that attitude, that posture of joy? Now, obviously, I get to do ministry, and so it seems to be a more direct correlation of doing God's work. But honestly, it feels like some days 90% of what I'm doing is a paramedic or a fireman, putting out fires. But when I can still see that as God's work, then that service is fulfilling, and there's the joy of the Lord.
I mean, that's there, right? In Scripture, it says it's more blessed to give than to receive. In the natural, that seems backwards. No, I want to receive. That's what gives me joy. But I mean, there is that weird reverse mentality of the kingdom, the upside down kingdom, where actually there's more joy in giving than receiving, right? And we see it. And like, I was talking to somebody just the other day, and they said, looking back in my life, he said, the times where I felt distinct memories of joy is when I was giving something away. And I realized how I never needed it. I didn't need it. I don't even know why I bought it. But it was in the giving it away that I felt like, oh, not only did I get it out of my life, but I gave it into somebody else's life, and it was beneficial, right? So he talked about that connection between generosity and joy.
Yeah, and I think it's connected to our faith. I mean, James kind of came against Paul's saved by grace with saying, "Hey, faith without works is dead." And I think works or generosity or service is a natural outpouring of our faith. And if our faith is grounded in that joy that, man, I've been saved, I've been redeemed, and now I get to be enlisted in the workforce of this King, then when there's purpose in what you're doing. And once again, that purpose is always there. You just have to realize it's there.
Yeah.
When you're preaching on Sunday, it's like, okay, there's a clear purpose. I'm being a prophet of the Lord. But when you're wiping tables or you're walking through a situation with someone that you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. But God is using you and you're in His service.
Yeah.
That joy remains.
You referred to a passage twice now. I want to go back to it for a second. Out of Ephesians, by grace you're saved through faith, not of yourselves. It's the gift of God, so that no one can boast. When someone gives me a beautiful gift, like when someone buys me dinner, there's like a smile on my face. There's like, oh, thank you. When someone gives me something that I didn't earn, I didn't pay for, it's totally free. Do you think? I was reflecting on the perception of church in our day and age, and how a lot of church or a lot of Christians are seen as angry or grumpy, kind of judgmental. And I think that's a criticism it's a fair criticism. Whether it's 100% true or not doesn't matter. It's still worth looking at. Do you think there's a connection between joylessness or grumpy Christians and is a joyless Christian a graceless Christian? Is that directly connected?
I think so, and I'll throw in another word that I think ties in here is our expectations. I think grumpiness is oftentimes a result of unmet expectations,
real or otherwise.
Correct,
accurate or otherwise. Yeah.
And I think God would love to just pull that word entirely out of the dictionary, or rather define it for us. And so, one thing that I try to posture myself with at the beginning of the day is literally I do go to my phone and my computer and I look at my calendar for the day, try to prepare myself and not be surprised by what's going on. I got a podcast today or whatever it is. But then, and this is something we pray over as a staff, God has His own calendar for us. And it's not on our phone. We don't see it. And so we have expectations of how our day is going to go. And God has expectations for us of how our day should be going according to His plan. And so we all understand what God's calendar looks like, those surprises, those often unwelcome surprises, sometimes welcome, sometimes unwelcome, but they're on His calendar.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like...
So you're living more in the moment. You're
Yes.
not planning things 6 months, 8 months out. Every day is an adventure.
And you've got to be really prayed up. And so when those things come in your path, you're not surprised. We say this with our
or
students.
Disappointed.
Yeah. We say this with our families constantly when we have what we call a discipleship opportunity with a student because they made a mistake with their behavior. We tell them, hey, we're not surprised. Not because you're a bad kid, but, oh yeah, you're a bad kid. If you weren't, you didn't need Jesus. We weren't born perfect. It's a worldview conversation. We were born with sin inside of you, and so we're not surprised that you're messed up. When my adult wife messes up, I'm not surprised. We're human. Now let's see, what does God expect of us moving forward? Just like Jesus said to the woman caught in adultery, I don't judge you either, but go and sin no more. So here's the grace, and by the way, let's learn from this. What does God expect of us, moving forward? So same thing with these surprise calendar visits that God throws in our path. When we're prayed up, we're not surprised. I think that helps with the grumpiness because if it's just like, no, wait a second, this wasn't on my calendar, God, this isn't okay, we can quickly say, wait a second, God knew about this, and what do you expect of me now?
Do we tend to be, in general, control people, control freaks? Do you think?
Control is so much more comfortable. I love.
But is it an illusion or is it real?
No, I don't think it's an illusion. I think we can create and define our reality where our experience is one of control.
Yeah.
Obviously, at the kingdom level, it's a mirage.
Right.
But
That's so
if we keep doubling down, it can be. In your home, in parenting, in your marriage, if you want control, and you switch careers, find a way where everything is lined up your way. But I think that type of control is amoral. Obviously, you have to have those open hands of surrender that says, no, I'm trying to do I get decision fatigue. We have so many decisions. I know you do as well.
I can so relate to that.
Yeah. And so it's constantly, God, what do you expect of me? And sometimes you feel like you're being too much of a control freak because you've had to make too many decisions.
Yeah.
And that's just, but someone has to make the decision.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
what we're getting paid for.
Right. And not just us in our careers, but in our homes, wherever we are, we're having to make decisions. But if it's I love the verse, in the multitude of counselors, there's wisdom. And so when you're starting to feel that decision fatigue or feel like in your flesh you're trying to control things too much, make sure you're having lots of conversations with others, giving them room to speak into it. That's part of surrendering to God. And then constantly talking to Him, hey, what do you expect of me in this situation?
So amazing. I think where you could relate to this, and everybody probably listening, when we look back just a few years ago in the pandemic, and all of a sudden everything was out of control. Everything was beyond our ability to predict, to know what was going on, to make plans. And I think it created an interesting dynamic working with people. As things came to the surface that you're like, wow, I never knew that was in you. Maybe you didn't know that was in yourself, but this brought it out. It reminds me, I was having a conversation this week with some missionaries who work in Vietnam. Vietnam is still officially, a communist country. There's all kinds of complexities in that, but they were saying that somehow we got on the subject of weddings, and they said in Vietnam you can't plan a wedding more than 2 weeks in advance because you never know when because you have to have a permit from the government to get married, and because of the labyrinth of bureaucracy, you never know when you're going to get your permit. So sometimes you only have a few weeks to really, because the permits are limited in time. And so all of a sudden you get the letter and you go, okay, well, we have to organize this. But they were just talking about it with such, like, in our culture, that would drive us crazy. But the spontaneity and the joy that's there, and they put it together and it comes off, and it's far less complexity, I guess, right? So, and I think we've seen this even on missions trips. We take people from American culture to a foreign field where time isn't as big a deal as it is with us here, or planning isn't as big a deal, or maybe even safety, right? How many seatbelts are in the van? I never counted them. I didn't realize we needed them. But do we see that, right? We see glimpses of it, like, I'm living my life through an American filter, culture filter, and not a kingdom filter, because, like you said earlier, in God's eyes, it's a totally, in the kingdom's eyes, it's a totally different approach. So.
Yeah. And I don't think it's either or. It's kind of both and. Both perspectives are helpful.
Function where we are.
In my flesh, it drives me crazy. I've been planning for 2025 now for like 6 months. That forward thinking piece.
That's why we love you.
Yeah. But then there's going to be moments before I go home today that surprise me that we're on God's calendar. One of the biggest blessings of my job, Bruce, is when I'm interviewing a new family that I've given them a tour of the campus, and I'm sitting down with them and figuring out, is this a good partnership? Are they a good fit for us? Are we a good fit for them? And I'll tell them, I said, this conversation was on God's calendar before the creation of the world. He knew we were going to be meeting today. And because it's a big conversation where their kids will be educated. But also all the things that brought them to us have been things that we've been working on for decades. And from that forward thinking. Yeah. And so it's
bigger picture.
Yeah. And so I try to picture, hey, 10 years down the road, God's going to be bringing a family and we'll be having a meeting. And what's the type of school? What's the type of place? What's the type of church that He's expecting us to continue to grow into, to be prepared to receive that family? Wow. I think that applies to areas of our life. Take parenting, for example. Let's say you have a 12-year-old who's soon going to be a 16-year-old. What forward thinking, what books should you be reading? What friendships, what conversations should you be having, so that when your 16-year-old arrives, it's not like Christmas where all of a sudden you didn't budget for
surprise,
it. Yeah, we don't have any money for Christmas. I didn't realize I was going to have a 16-year-old. Yeah, that was predictable and preparing yourself, knowing that once again we should still feel completely weak, giving room for God's power to be perfected in us.
It reminds me of a book by Viktor Frankl, who wrote about his experience in the camps during the Holocaust, and he survived those camps, but he talked about why some people emotionally survived and others didn't. They fell into the pit of despair and they just literally died in the camps. And what they had come to sort of recognize is we're just going to take one day at a time. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, so we're just going to live one day at a time. And in doing that, they found some kind of a peace with their existence, right? Because they were their lives were out of their control. They were totally subjugated and so forth. But he just had this one day at a time. We're just going to live for today and get through today. Kind of reminds me of Jesus telling us to pray, give us today our daily bread. And I'm not going to give you 30 days. I'm going to give you your daily bread. Right?
Yeah. A popular, saying in the world is fake it until you make it. And, there can be some practical principles there that are helpful. But in the kingdom, I think it discounts God's sovereignty. It discounts his power. It's kind of like make it and you'll make it. Yeah. Like get up and talk to God. And worship him, as we've said.
Be proactive.
Yeah, as we've said from the pulpit, when we worship God, you can't have an attitude of gratitude in your mind at the same time you're having stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
So accessing that joy of the Lord here at the school, we've got 8 or 9 core values for our staff, for our team, for the culture of us as servants of God, and one of those is to walk in the joy of the Lord, I try not to tell them fake it till you make it. It's like make it, and that means being a part of a vibrant church community, starting every morning with prayer, driving into worship, and then when you do consider all the baggage of our lives, is it on your back? Because that's not where it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be at Jesus' feet. He'll pick it up, put it on his back. We're yoked with him. We're still walking through that. But if you're carrying it, it's the wrong person that's carrying it. And
that's interesting. Going back to the original illustration of the light flashing on the dashboard, reality is I need to pull over. I need to put oil in the engine. It's a very practical thing. It's not super, maybe I should pray about this or, in a sense of it's right. There's some practical things that you can integrate into your life that actually feed the joy and silence the whining or the pity, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. And to circle back around to that first question, I think fatigue is something you need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
I think
because that's part of our lives.
Right. And I think that's part of God's communication to you, because we are in this tent,
we have limitations.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I prefer to not let circumstances drive how I'm feeling, or circumstances drive my joy. But there are times when the circumstances, there's been a lot of them, and they've been tough.
They're reoccurring.
Yes, and there's a fatigue that's going on, and so that doesn't mean I should just go isolate myself. Proverbs says, "He who isolates himself seeks his own desire," and that comes with some judgment.
It doesn't mean I'm failing either, right?
Right.
Because I'm tired or I'm in sin or something.
Right. But I think that's like, okay, how am I going to refuel there? And once again, you follow Jesus. I think he had that warning light, and what did we see him do? He's like, I got to get away. Exactly.
Desert place. Yeah.
Yep.
Isn't it interesting that even Jesus recognized his limitations? I think that's a tough part of us, and especially in our day and age, the fake it till you make it, pull yourself up by the bootstraps sort of a thing mentality. But we're created with limitations, and those limitations point to our design, which in turn point to our designer. I'm not God. I'm not superhuman. I need to rest. I need to withdraw. I need to pray.
And the irony is that is strength.
Yeah.
That is the strength. And so as we're hiring new employees and so forth, when people communicate their humility, their weakness, their dependency on God, I like, this person's strong.
Yeah.
This person,
they've learned.
This person will walk through the fire with us.
They've learned
because they have a source that's eternal and unlimited, as opposed to, well, this is what I've got figured out, and so forth.
Isn't that interesting? There's a maturity there. Hey, as we finish up here, educators, summer is the promised land for a month or so. What are you going to do this summer that recharges your batteries? What do you do?
My daughter comes home from college, and we get to spend time with her, so that's always sweet. My son and I love to go and climb mountains, and so we got we've been putting in a permit to go climb Mount Whitney, tallest mountain in the 48 states, and we finally pulled that permit. So we'll be doing that in July.
Wow.
Yeah, so that'll be fun. Then we'll swing over to Colorado and do some of the peaks there in the Rockies.
Nice. That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Man, appreciate all that you do. How many years have you been in ministry, education, and so forth? How many years?
25.
25. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
15
great.
right here.
Yeah. You don't look it. You're still,
Neither do you.
Yeah. And that's not true. So, Adam, it's been good to have you.
Thanks,
we
Bruce.
appreciate you so much. You and your wife, Chantel, just bring so much beauty and quality to this ministry. I don't know what we would do without you. So thanks for giving it your all and staying healthy.
You bet. Love being here.
Yeah, if this helped you, pass it along to somebody else. We're here on Sundays, Mother's Day and other things like that. Join us. Come on down and let us know if there's anything we can do to help. Thanks for being with us. God bless.